You can see me though, right? You can see
Yeah.
me? Okay.
Oh, okay. I think we're streaming.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Cool. So,
Yeah. Okay.
all right. Well, sorry for the late start, people. We had a little health issue and a family member to deal with, but I'm super
Yes.
excited. Welcome to the Nailed Pitch. My name is
Super
Carl
excited.
Ponto, and my
Thank you,
guest
Carl.
today,
Mhm.
is Posit of VWAT Kirkle,
Yes. Yes.
CEO and founder of Obaki, and he
Mhm.
has a successful exits from a number of startups. And so, I'm the purpose of this show is to help founders that are trying to seek funding understand what VCs and investors are looking for, and bridge the communication gap between those two parties so that more promising startups can get the funding they need to grow and succeed. So, Posset wanted to talk about something that was, I think he wants to, I think is really important for founders to understand, which is, um, you see so many young founders blaming themselves for failures, but in reality, it's just part of the journey. Posset, tell us more about who you are, what your story is, and what you think about this topic.
Hi. So I'm Passive Kirkle. I exit multiple startups, and I just sold my recent startup, Music Freelancer, for $50 million. I've done in the VC circle. I've been a very well familiar and the deals making, and also just being around founders. You learn a lot from them, and also from life. And what you're talking about right there, Carl, is that before I even came on the show with you, I had a family issue. And sometimes life just go up and down, and you got to be strong, got to be patient. And that's made me realize when I was coming here that they do have correlation as well with startups, because you have tons of founders out there thinking that they're blaming themselves, that, oh, they're not getting revenue, or they're not getting great marketing, or maybe they're doing wrong, or is their team doing wrong. It's just part of the journey. Actually, you're going to be making tons of mistakes, learning from it, but life goes on and your business have to go on. I've seen a lot of great founders quit before they make it big, and their idea was amazing. But I also see a lot of the scrappiness guys, the guy that just pull through, keep going. They don't care what's going to happen to them, and they become success, which is it's very interesting. If you come and correlate with life, it's the same. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely that need for being able to kind of roll with the punches and adapt quickly. Being agile, I think,
Yep.
is what term a lot of people use.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
in this, yeah, so I think and I've definitely experienced that as an entrepreneur, not necessarily
Uh,
trying to do the
yep.
startup funding raising thing, but just having to
Yeah.
adapt, especially when like the pandemic kicked off. I think everyone kind of got
Right.
a crash course in being adaptive and pivoting.
Yep. Yep.
But I think it really just that skill set, or that mindset of
Mhm.
not quitting when things get rough, of always looking to
Right.
move forward,
Right.
is a key indicator of a founder's likelihood of being a success. And
Yeah.
so, what are some of the things you've done to keep your spirits up, or to kind of not get bogged down by the
Mm.
stresses or the challenges of the start being a founder?
Yeah.
What are some
Yeah.
tips or the kind of techniques or tips or things you've done to help you get through those
Yeah.
situations?
So like the first of all start, we're all human. Of course, we suffer deep depression or feel like we're guilty in the startup world, right?
Mhm.
But what I do is I reverse thinking, and I just trying to say to myself, what am I doing and how did it start it? And it's kind of weird. I use a negative reinforcement to make myself positive, meaning I will think of the bad thing that happens, and I will come and correlate in my head and say, hey, you know what? That was a good experience, or that is new, or that's weird. Like trying to make a joke, or see the bright side of it. So that's what really, I know it sounds very weird from different founders, but I actually use negative reinforcement to get myself going. And it works because you realize what you're doing, why you're doing it. You realize that if you do make a mistakes, it's not your fault. It's sometimes it just happens. You cannot control it, but that make you keep going. It's kind of like you taking a cold shower bath, but in your brain. It makes you kind of wake up and realize the reality. That's
Yes,
one
I
way. And
think
then yeah.
It sounds like being able to reframe or look at the
Right.
situation a different way. And I think it's
Yeah.
mindfulness in general
Hmm.
is, I think, a good habit or good skill to build
Right.
as a founder, because
Right.
there's so many things going on. There's so many things that you have to pay attention to.
Yeah.
It's very easy
Yes.
to lose track, lose focus on yourself,
Right.
and get influenced or pulled in different directions by investors or by your team or by the market, or um and so taking the time every day to kind of be grounded and focus on who you are and
Mhm.
what's really driving you and what your priorities
Right.
are, or
Right.
your motivations, that sort of thing.
Right. Hmm.
And that can help keep perspective on things when they go awry, what's really worth
Hmm.
stressing about, what's really worth your time. And I think that can help avoid some of that overwhelm that can
Right.
easily happen
Hmm.
if people are feeling that they're pulled in 5 or 6 different directions at once as a
Hmm.
founder.
I definitely, relate to that. I definitely agree with that. And I've seen guys, or founders cannot go through because of that. But it's funny, and adding to the subject of that, VC actually love people that fail many times before and get up. For example, I went to Web Summit a few years ago, and I was talking to one of the 500 startup VCs, and he mentioned to me the thing that always stuck to my head. He said, if you want to come to me, you rather fail a few times before you reach me. And I went back and I think about it like, oh, he want a tough founder. He want a founder that went through the ropes. If there's an obstacle, go around it many times. And if they want to invest in you, then having a new founder that completely don't know what he's doing, and if something happened, they break down. So this is an interesting topic that it's cannot really be teach. It's got to be experience of the founder, through the journey. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it also just shows. Yeah, it's interesting how the criteria of the VC, if he's going to invest, is that you have to have failed multiple times before.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, that's a great uh, insight to have, and something that maybe other, like, as if you're researching a firm or a certain VC, you're trying to get it to be an investor, um, looking for those sorts of things. That the
Hmm.
criteria is
Hmm.
important, but also I think it just shows that I think a lot of people try and hide their failures, which are ashamed of their failures and
Exactly.
don't want to
Yep.
talk about them, don't
Yep.
want to admit that they've failed before.
Yeah. Yep.
And instead of owning that and showing what they learned from it, I
Right.
think that's something that if you hide it,
Mm-hmm.
it's perceived as one way. But if you own it and like bring it up at the beginning, if you're doing like a first pitch and say, hey, this is like, I'm so and so, and
Hmm.
or company's doing this, and we've made, like, I used to and it's part of your bio
Yeah.
when you're getting, like,
Yeah.
saying, hey, I've had these many found, like, startups, this many failed, this many have been
Hmm.
successful, and like, um just putting it out there, being not trying to hide it, I think is a great way to show
Right. Right.
confidence and the experience. And it sounds like, especially for that sort of VC, de-risks you as an investment,
Yeah.
because he knows, okay, you've been through all those hardships and you're still trying to
Yep.
do the, you're still in the game, you're not
Yeah.
going to go back to a 9 to 5. Um that could be a great way of reframing those failures as qualifications for being a good investment.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. I actually admire a lot of founders. If I was in the VC shoes, and I did some angel investment along the way for about 2, 3 years already, and I actually admire people that actually fail many times and actually still go up, like stand up, and still going, because they always have interesting story to tell me. Like if I sometime I'll be like, okay, what happened if this is gonna happen, or what happened if that gonna happen? They they somehow know how to go around the obstacle way more faster than new founders that never done anything. So it is good. I do admire these people that keep going. Like if it doesn't work, then do something else. If that thing works, then you're set. Which is very interesting that I've seen two sides of it. But I do admire the people that keep going. Yeah.
And so when people are in that mode of
Mhm.
okay, something's not working, we need to pivot, need to change, need to keep going.
Yep.
What are some of the processes you've found that help you identify, okay, this path isn't working, I need to try something else? How do you determine what that other thing is? What are some processes or like techniques you use to find those new ways forward?
So when I started at first, since I did everything, I tried to identify the problem as early as possible. Some founders might think that, okay, you have to identify the good first, but I always identify the bad first. Like I said from the beginning, think backwards. And I always feel like, okay, if this path has more pothole than that path, and that pothole keep going, then that way is not going to work. And you got to try another way. But what I do is that I use the fishbowl technique where if you're doing something at once, you know what's going to happen for both. But if one of them fail, you still at this level for this one instead of starting from zero. So I try to do multiple things at once and see which one has the most power. If it's a lot of power, then I'm not going to do that way. So I try to identify the problem as early as possible. Yeah.
Yes, identify the problem early as possible and then try multiple solutions at once. So if one
Yes.
doesn't work,
Yeah.
you're still making, you're not putting all your eggs into one solution.
Exactly. Yeah.
So like if a problem is, say, like a lead generation or like like and then maybe you do a couple different online platforms and you do you don't just do all, we're gonna go all into like Google ads, we're gonna do maybe a little bit of Google ads, a little into like speaking engagements, do some events and like
maybe do some co-op marketing, like there's so many ways. Yeah.
So diversification of your efforts. Obviously, you can't do too much. You can't do like all the different things because then you'd probably spread too thin. But picking like 2 or 3, do you think is like 2 or 3?
Yeah.
It's like 2 or 3 possible solutions.
Right.
And move forward with them. And and so when you have been in the startup world for a while, what sort of, who's been a good like mentor or coach or guide for you in your process, and then what sort of support do you recommend founders get as they're going? Because maybe that could be like helping avoid some of these potholes you mentioned that are out there. Having the right sort of guide could be help you avoid some in the first place. So who are some people that you've had supporting you on your journey that you've had really valued those relationships?
I met Tony Shu from DoorDash at Web Summit a long time ago, and I had a chat with him for a while, and I would consider him my hero because his approach thinking is just amazing from a bootstrap standpoint, and he taught me a lot about the whole bootstrapping thing. Because DoorDash in the beginning, they were called Palo Alto Delivery. They literally bootstrapped the whole thing themselves for a while. So he taught me a lot of that, and also Stanley Tang, his co-founder, his CTO, also taught me a lot about sometimes you just gotta go on the wrong path and see what it is. And sometimes the right path is too easy. Like I was saying, like take the hard road first. Those guys are definitely a good mentor. Another good mentor for me is my father, because he's very successful as well. But when I did my own thing, I completely bootstrapped. No one helped me at all. No one really helped me. I was all by myself. But learning from him when I was young and seeing how he fight through every single path, and if it doesn't work, you turn around really fast and go on the next path. So those are the 3 people that I've seen, and just being around. I recommend like founders to go out and do a lot of networking, not for the sake of networking, but for the sake of learning how other founder thinks, learning how the VC thinks. Because when these people talk, they pretty much on the same path, like I would say. So if new founders want to come in, that's the great way, because I do know a lot of startups, sometimes they're kind of like, how would you say, like shy or introvert, right? Like where they don't want to go out, they're just in a little bubble and stuff. But you do really need to go out and network and meet people and just learning just by being around them.
Yeah, I know that counterintuitively, it's the introverts that are better networkers because they're able to build deeper relationships with people. If you go out and like talk for 5 minutes with like 1,000 people, they're not going to remember you. But if you talk to say 10 people at an event, for half an hour and really get to know them well,
Yeah.
and then they put and invest in those relationships, then
Yeah.
you actually will get some good returns on it. And it's
Yeah. You're right.
introverts that are better at that. So, and I know it's draining. I'm introverted,
Oh
and so
yeah.
but I can go out and
Yeah.
network. But after like if I go to like back when I've been like I think the last conference I went to
Uh-huh.
before the pandemic, I can't remember what it is, but I remember
Okay.
just like at the end I'll just be exhausted because it's so draining. But it's so good. So like
Yeah.
so you mentioned I think it's a great tip going out there. And so what events or what kind of like do you have any particular events in the startup world that you recommend founders go to to kind of be
Yeah.
able to network? What are some of the good ones?
You know what's funny, Carl, is that the big one are actually the one that kind of waste of time, to be honest. The
Yeah.
smaller one, the smaller circle one, where you actually get to talk to people, get to connect with them more. Those are the one that I think the most valuable. Let's say if a founder is throwing like a private house party or something, and he only lets some people know. I think you should go to those more than the big one where you don't know who's who and they're gonna forget
Yeah.
about you. Yeah.
So how do you find what are some of like the smaller ones you recommend? Or how can
Mhm.
people find those? Because big
You
ones are easy
know,
to
yeah.
find. Yeah.
Yeah. You know the last year was I believe it was last year. It was the Tech in LA. Tech in LA or Tech in New York. Those are not too big. They're a smaller scale, but you really get to connect with people more faster. And if you type in Tech in LA or New York Tech Week, yeah, that's what they call it now. They call it Tech Week. I think those are more better and more closer to meet people and meet VC and actually mingle with them than just meeting them at an event and they don't know like who you are.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think the Utah Tech Week was going on this week. So I
All
think
right, right. Uh-huh. Yeah.
so the different locations Tech Week. Okay, that's so what's if someone's going to be going to that one of those, if they find the event,
Hmm.
they're able to get there.
Yeah.
What are some of your kind of tips for how they can prepare when they get there and what they should do? What's the strategy for how to find the right people, or what sort of
Okay.
because I know you can get like if you're just wandering around and talking to people you happen to come across when you're waiting in line to get into a keynote or
Yeah.
whatever. You get one level of results, but if you have a plan when you enter there, especially for introverts, if you don't really naturally like enjoy those sort of big events, what are some things people can do to prep for those? Have a strategy going in so they're more likely to get the ROI they want for their time and money
Yeah.
and uh, just the draining social interaction for
Mhm.
introverts. So,
Mhm.
what are some of the techniques you have that work well?
Some of the technique I did, and or the early on and now, it's like I like to kind of find one person first. I know it's weird, but I tend to like kind of relate to them. And suddenly, when those person go to the group, I was like, hey, like, can I, join you guys? But I tend to always observe first and listen to the different kind of topic that they're saying. Of course, if they're like talking random topics that I don't want to listen, then don't go in that group. But I prepare myself like mentally to answer every question that they have. I don't know, it's my kind of thing. And for introvert, I know it's very hard for that, and you don't know who's who, right? Because there's so much people. Find someone that you feel like it can connect with you. Maybe you could start with something like, hey, what type of movie or something? I don't know, like just to get to know them a little bit more,
Yeah,
and then the
icebreaker.
conversation will start moving forward, and you start going deeper, and then you guys start talking of what your feel is. I think those are more better connection, so they can actually reference you to people in the future, and it's better connection than just going up to like 10 like what 20 people. I don't know like what they're doing, just talking fast. I think just kind of like ease in on them first, slowly with each person. But if I say go with like meeting 30, 40 people at once, it's not worth it, because they're not going to remember you, and you're not going to remember like what you guys talking about
Yeah,
you
I
know
think for me when I go to those sort of events, I bring a lot of like business cards and something to write people's contact info down because you're
yeah,
not
yeah,
going
yeah,
to be
yeah.
able to. People aren't going to be able to want to talk for too long at the event.
Of course, they usually
Um,
talk a little bit and they go.
yeah,
Yeah,
but I think so. Make sure you can follow up with people and
yeah,
having something like and bring like a ballpoint pen and also bring a Sharpie
yep,
and like one that's like not black color because that way you can write notes on people's cards
yeah,
what you talked about.
yeah.
Um, and some of the business cards aren't good for writing, or if people are doing digital stuff, having some sort of
Yeah.
way of
Yeah.
taking notes so you remember what you talked about. And then
Yeah.
one thing I like to do with those sort of events, especially if you like go with like a buddy or like go with some friend to kind of code network. So if you're going to introduce people to you, or like if you're going to go and like meet people, you can introduce each other.
Yep.
It's one thing if you say, here's what I do, and I'm really good at this, but if you have someone who's not necessarily in the same company,
right?
but like a friend goes
Yeah.
basically introduce you to people, then that carries more weight, and you kind of play off each other.
Yeah.
And that makes the initial interactions not quite as cold, because you're coming up with there's more people involved. Like you have a familiar face in the group. And I like to try and set like a goal for how many people I connect with each day, or at like a certain time limit, because you don't want to get super like sucked into one conversation for 2 hours.
You want to move on, right?
You know, so having like talk for like no more than like 10 minutes with each person, and then and also like set a time to follow up afterwards, or time to like to connect. These days with like the Calendly links, I've done this thing where I print out a sheet with like a QR code to my Calendly thing, so people can use their phone and like book the follow-up meeting like right there, and have to type anything in. But then also going out and like trying to gamify it for me. I don't know if it works for me. I don't know if it works for other people, but I try and say, okay, I'm gonna talk to like I'm gonna talk to the like 10 people in this in the first like in the morning of this like event. And that way it's a little less daunting, because you can
your milestone.
You're breaking down I'm gonna go here and network into smaller tasks. And so it's not like, oh my gosh, there's so many people, how do I handle all this stuff? It's okay, in this next like 2 hours, and like between the next keynote thing I'm going to, I want to talk to this many people. And that way it takes the task of network at a huge event down into little bite-sized chunks.
Yeah, little chunk. And I tend to like kind of identify the people first. You know how sometimes you start off a good conversation with the person, and it's kind of get off rail. So I kind of always tend to look for that cue as well, to move on, right?
And I think also asking, one great way to kind of to transition, is asking people. Doesn't work at the very beginning, but asking like, who's someone you've met that really stood out to you? And I might even say, I'm trying to meet VCs that invest in like this stage company. Have you met anyone, or who's a good person that you've met that might be, and like ask people to connect you, because they probably have like might have just talked to someone who's the exact right person for you to talk to.
Reference.
It'd be hard for you to find them kind of randomly. If you ask people like, I'm looking for these sorts of people, have you met anyone like this at the event? Oh yeah. And then maybe like let you take a picture of their card or share their information, and like say, oh yeah, no, he's going to be this booth at this thing, and they can obviously it's not as good as like a referral, but at least they can save you the time of wandering around searching for yourself. So asking people questions like what's like, who have you met that's interesting, or what's
connect with them
like
first.
a good speaker you've seen that can help speed up and focus your efforts when networking, and if you're trying to find VCs or investors and that's a tip that I've found really helpful, especially at big events, because you never know who's there, and if people have already met someone, then they can at least and they already have their contact info because they just talked to them. So it's not like it's, oh, I gotta find it in my like go check my CRM when I get home sort of thing. It's, oh, I got the card right here, check them out, and it's easy. So those are those are great tips for work in a room, because I think there's more and more of these in-person events happening again, which is great.
Right. I would say, like, from my experience and your experience combined, just pretty much like, move fast and try to identify who's who first, and give yourself time to keep moving, like the gist of it. Yeah.
And so when you're from the invest, now let's put on kind of like your investor hat now. Somebody asked everyone who comes on the show, because there's so many. What's like one of the biggest mistakes you see founders make when they're trying to pitch to an investor?
Not telling a story. Not telling a story. Sometime I met founder where it's the most complicated, craziest pitch deck I ever seen, but their story is so flowing and so convincing that is great. And I met founder with very easy startup, but the way they explain it is just all over the place. Just tell me a story. I like kind of like how, like, how do you start? Why do you start? Was there any crazy event that happened to you for you to lead you to here? That's what I'm looking for. And those founders are the one that I tend to see like really very like good and move fast and identify the problem because they make it very short and they're telling a story that you want to hear. Like you want to hear more. You're like, oh yeah, tell me more. It's not about your business anymore. I just want to know more of the story. And that's what I see with some of the great founders. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I go to a lot of these pitch events where people are going to
Yeah.
have a couple minutes to pitch their startup, and
They just go all
they
crazy, right?
dive
Like,
right into like the product and the tech stack, and it's all the jargon, and you're like, I have no idea what you're saying, and I don't really care because I don't
Yeah.
really know you or why you're doing this, or like
Right.
there's no story behind it. And it's amazing how little like training or emphasis like founders get, or like some of these like the accelerators don't help the founders with the storytelling as much as
You're right. You're right.
but
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
and it's funny because I've asked this of pretty much every guest I've had on the show, and
Mhm.
almost all of them have said you need to tell better stories. Like the biggest mistake
Yeah.
you make, and it's like
Yeah.
if it seems like it's such a well-known secret, and that still so many founders don't do it. And I don't know why. I mean,
Maybe because I'm nervous. I don't know, Carl. Maybe they're
yeah,
nervous or like, what do
yeah,
you think?
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you so much for being on the show. We're
Thank
pretty much
you.
at time. So
Yeah.
hopefully your the family like health issues are
Yeah.
resolved, and
I'm
but
gonna have to
it's
go back in. Yeah.
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 But thank you so much for being on the show, and
Yeah.
look forward to
I
hearing
will.
more about and hopefully
Yes.
seeing at some events sometime.
Yeah, definitely. I'll be back in the US around like March. And again, thank you, Carl. It's an honor to be on your show. I wish I could do it again in the future.
Yeah,
This is
sure.
great. You have awesome question, very fun. It's not boring or anything. It's great.
All right, have a
Thank you
good
so
one.
much. Have a good one. Bye bye.
Bye.